The laughter echoed through the courtroom like something sharp and careless, the kind that cuts deeper because it pretends to be harmless. It came from the bench itself, from the place where justice was supposed to sit tall and impartial. At the center of that sound stood a poor widow, thin shoulders hunched, fingers trembling as they clutched a worn file of papers that barely held her life together. Her grief was still fresh, her eyes still swollen from nights without sleep. And yet in that moment, she was treated like an inconvenience, like a joke that had gone on too long. No one in that courtroom knew that everything was about to change, and that the laughter would soon die the instant the heavy doors opened. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that the world still bends toward justice when ordinary people stand together, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter because they remind us who we are meant to be. The widow's name was Miriam, and until a year ago, her life had been quiet and unremarkable in the way most honest lives are. She had been married for 23 years to a man who fixed motorcycles in a small roadside garage, a man whose hands were always stained with grease but whose heart was gentle and steady. When he died suddenly in an accident caused by a wealthy contractor's reckless negligence, Miriam's world collapsed into a single, endless day of survival. The garage was seized, the compensation promised never came, and the contractor's lawyers buried her in paperwork she could barely read. By the time the case reached court, she had sold her jewelry, her furniture, and nearly her dignity, just to afford the filing fees and transport. The courtroom itself felt cold and towering, designed to make people like Miriam feel small. The polished floors reflected the ceiling lights so harshly that they hurt her eyes, and every step she took echoed too loudly, as if announcing her poverty to everyone present. She stood alone at the plaintiff's table, no expensive lawyer at her side, only a court-appointed advocate who looked tired and distant, already resigned to losing. Across the room sat the contractor's legal team in crisp suits, whispering and smiling with the confidence of people who had never feared hunger or eviction, and above them all sat the judge, a man known for efficiency, for moving cases along quickly, and for having little patience with those who did not know how the system worked. As Miriam's case was summarized, her mistakes were highlighted more than her suffering. A missing document, a form filled incorrectly, a deadline misunderstood. The judge shook his head, sighed loudly, and then came that laugh, brief but unmistakable, as he remarked on how unprepared she was to challenge a man of such status. It was not cruel in tone, but it was dismissive, and dismissiveness can be just as devastating. Miriam felt her face burn as quiet chuckles rippled through the room. She lowered her eyes, not out of guilt, but because looking up felt like inviting more humiliation. What no one in that courtroom paid attention to was the door at the back, the one that opened slowly and quietly at first. The sound of boots against marble began to replace the murmurs, heavy and deliberate, one after another. Heads turned, curiosity flickering across faces that had moments earlier been bored. A line of bikers entered, leather jackets worn and weathered, vests stitched with patches faded by years of sun and rain. They were not loud, not aggressive, just present in a way that demanded attention. One by one, they filled the back benches, standing shoulder to shoulder because there were not enough seats. Miriam noticed them only when a shadow fell across her papers. She glanced back, confusion and fear mixing in her chest. She did not recognize them at first, but something about the way they stood, calm and grounded, made her breathing slow. The judge paused mid-sentence, irritation flashing across his face as he demanded to know what was going on. The bailiff hurried to restore order, but the bikers did not resist or protest. They simply waited, silent, their eyes forward. The explanation came through court procedure rather than words spoken aloud. A clerk whispered urgently to the judge, passing him a file thicker than Miriam's entire case bundle. The judge's expression shifted as he flipped through pages, his amusement fading, replaced by concentration, and then something like unease. These were not random men who had wandered in off the street. They were witnesses, character references, and legal representatives of a registered motorcycle association with deep roots in the community. More importantly, they were the people Miriam's husband had once helped, riders stranded late at night, veterans struggling to find purpose, young men who needed guidance more than punishment. Years earlier, Miriam's husband had opened his garage to anyone who needed help, often refusing payment if the person could not afford it. He had fixed bikes for free, offered meals, listened to stories, and quietly built a family far larger than either of them realized. When he died, those people mourned him in their own ways, and when they learned how Miriam was being treated, they organized not with anger, but with intention. They gathered documents, testimonies, and resources, and they walked into that courtroom not to intimidate, but to stand witness to a life of quiet goodness. The judge cleared his throat and adjusted his posture. The room, once buzzing with smug certainty, had fallen into a heavy silence. The contractor's lawyers shifted uncomfortably as the judge announced a recess to review new material. When proceedings resumed, the tone had changed entirely. The judge no longer rushed, no longer scoffed. He listened as evidence of negligence was laid out clearly, as testimonies described the contractor's pattern of cutting corners, and as community members explained the impact of Miriam's husband's death, not just on one family, but on an entire network of people he had supported. Miriam stood there, tears sliding down her cheeks, not from shame this time, but from something warmer and more painful all at once. She realized she had never truly been alone. Every meal she had skipped, every night she had cried quietly so the neighbors would not hear, had been seen in some way by people she never thought to call family. The bikers did not look at her with pity. They looked at her with respect, with the kind of loyalty that cannot be bought or forced. As the hours passed, the contractor's confidence eroded. His legal team faltered under scrutiny, their arguments unraveling when faced with detailed records and credible witnesses. The judge's questions grew sharper, more precise, driven now by a sense of responsibility rather than convenience. By the time the final ruling was delivered, the laughter that had once filled the room felt like a distant memory from another lifetime. The judgment favored Miriam, not as an act of charity, but as a matter of law finally applied correctly. She was awarded compensation sufficient to secure her home, reopen the garage if she chose, and live without the constant fear that had hollowed her out. More than that, the court formally acknowledged the injustice she had endured, a rare thing that mattered deeply to her wounded sense of dignity. As people filed out, the bikers remained for a moment, ensuring Miriam was steady on her feet. They did not crowd her or overwhelm her with attention. They simply nodded, some touching their hearts briefly in a quiet sign of respect, before leaving as calmly as they had arrived. The courtroom returned to its usual rhythm, but something invisible had shifted. A reminder that justice is not just a system, but a reflection of who shows up and why. Outside, sunlight warmed Miriam's face for the first time in what felt like years. She inhaled deeply, the weight on her chest lighter than it had been since the day her husband died. She knew the road ahead would still have challenges. Grief does not vanish with a single victory. But she also knew now that her husband's kindness had not disappeared with him. It had multiplied, carried forward on two wheels and steadfast hearts. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even in the darkest rooms compassion can walk in and change everything, please take a moment to like the video, share it, and subscribe. Your engagement helps keep stories like this alive. And before you go, leave a comment telling us what this story made you feel, or share a moment when unexpected support changed your life. Sometimes, those words become hope for someone else who is silently struggling. In the end, Miriam did not remember the judge's laughter as the defining moment of that day. She remembered the sound of boots on marble, the quiet strength of people who showed up without being asked, and the powerful truth that kindness leaves a legacy no court can ever dismiss.